Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia. Welcome back to our Zhuge Liang's Northern Expedition lore series as we continue with episode 2 titled The Attack Route. Now we ended our last episode as Zhuge Liang's army arrived in Hanzhong after a long march from Chengdu in March of 227. But instead of setting off for the campaign right away, Zhuge Liang would have to rest his forces for the remainder of 227 as they would join Wei Yan's garrison in Hanzhong to plant and harvest food necessary for the campaign ahead, since the mountainous terrain of the Qinling mountain ranges makes it impossible to rely on traditional supply lines from the Yi province. And during this downtime, Zhuge Liang also extracted his revenge on Meng Da, as a simple plot with Guo Mo brought an end to this traitor, without wasting any Shuhan resources, as Sima Yi would end up doing the dirty work for Zhuge Liang. Now, some of you were wondering if it would not have been better to just accept Meng Da's surrender, as you could technically reclaim the Shangyong region. But if you look at the map here, Shangyong is situated right where the mountains of Hanzhong and the plains of the Jin province meet. When Guan Yu was in control of the Jin province, control of Shangyong was vital, as it would provide essential linkage between Liu Bei's forces in Hanzhong and Guan Yu's forces in the Jin province. And Guan Yu's presence in the Jin province would also shield Shangyong from any potential attack from Wei. But now, without control of the Jin province after Guan Yu's death, Shangyong becomes undefendable by Shu Han, as it would require a massive army there to hold it from relentless attacks from Wei. In addition, the path from Hanzhong to Shangyong was very difficult to traverse and never suitable for large armies to maneuver through, which is why it was never used by either side as a route for conquest into or out of Hanzhong. So this meant that whatever army you sent to defend Shangyong would pretty much have to defend it to the death, as they would never be able to retreat back to Hanzhong if things go wrong. And speaking of suitable routes out of Hanzhong, there were 5 possible choices for Zhuge Liang to pick from. And if we look at the map here, the 4 path shown on the eastern side links to the ancient capital city of Chang'an. As the capital of the Western Han Dynasty for roughly 200 years, Chang'an now served as the Wei's western capital and the main garrison of the Western forces in charge of defending the newly renamed Yong province, as it's no longer called the Liang province under Wei regime. And at this time, the Wei general of the West in charge of Chang'an was Xiahou Mao, who was Xiahou Dun's eldest son and the husband of Princess of Qinghe, who was the oldest daughter of Cao Cao and the aunt of the current emperor Cao Rui. But unlike his father and uncle before him, Xiahou Mao was not a military man, as he had been mostly interested in running businesses, amassing wealth, and collecting concubines in the past decade as the general of the West, since many believe that after the failures at Yiling and the death of Liu Bei, the Shu Han threat was gone for good. And because of this, Wei Yan, who had been in charge of defending Hanzhong ever since Liu Bei first gained control of it, offered his services to Zhuge Liang during the planning phase of the first expedition by suggesting that he could take Chang'an with a force of just 5,000 of his best men if he was allowed to take the Ziwu path to strike directly at Chang'an, as he firmly believed that Xiahou Mao would abandon the city at the first sight of a Shu Han army. This, of course, would also be a historical callback to the campaigns of the first emperor of the Han Dynasty, when General Han Xin, who served under Liu Bang, also took this path to surprise attack Tong Gate. But Zhuge Liang turned down this plan for 2 main reasons. First, even though the Ziwu path was the most eastern and direct path to Chang'an, it was also the oldest and least maintained and most treacherous path of the 4, as it had been destroyed by Liu Yan after Liu Yan had taken control of the Yi province. This meant that Wei Yan's 5,000-man army would certainly suffer a bit of attrition just by taking this path. Not only that, the army would have to carry all the necessary supplies with them, as no supply line would be able to reach them once they crossed over into Chang'an. Then, considering the difficulty of the track itself, any retreat attempt through the path would also be impossible, which almost guaranteed that Wei Yan's plan was a one-way ticket that either resulted in a spectacular success or catastrophic failure. And even if you discount all the geographic and logistic challenges, the second issue with this plan is that the entire plan hinges on Xiahou Mao's cowardice, as unless he abandons Chang'an immediately, there was no way that Wei Yan's 5,000-man army could even put a dent in the walls of Chang'an. And without any means to resupply, Wei Yan would also not be able to siege the city into submission, as they would run out of supplies long before the city would even starve. Now, of course, the merits of Wei Yan's suggestion would be debated for centuries, as even though Wei Yan would obey Zhuge Liang's orders here, he would still try to repeatedly offer alternative attack plans on each of the subsequent northern expeditions, all to no avail, which led him to make the statement that Zhuge Liang is a coward and was wasting away his talents. Now, personally, I do agree with Zhuge Liang's analysis for the most part, as if we look at the later campaigns by both Wei and Shu Han in this area, the Ziwu path was never used by either side for these exact reasons. And even Wei's attack using the neighboring Tangluo path, which was slightly better maintained than the Ziwu path, resulted in failure, proving that Wei Yan's Ziwu path plan most likely would not have worked either. Lastly, sieges during the Three Kingdoms period heavily favor the defense, as fortifications of this time period vastly outperform the available siege technology. So unless Xiahou Mao would open the gates and invite Wei Yan into the city, there was just no conceivable way for Wei Yan's small force of 5,000 to ever threaten Chang'an. Now, with Wei Yan's plan rejected, Zhuge Liang would present his own, which involves none of the four eastern paths, as his target for the first northern expedition was not actually the city of Chang'an, as outlined in his famous Chu Shi Biao, or the report he wrote to Emperor Liu Shan, where he outlined the current state of affairs for the kingdom of Shu Han, and their need for such a northern expedition, as he felt it was his duty and obligation to the late Emperor Liu Bei to help restore the Han by retaking the former capitals of Chang'an and ultimately Luoyang. Instead, Zhuge Liang's main aim for the first northern expedition was actually the 5 western commanderies that made up the Yong province in Longxi, Nan'an, Tianshui, Guangwei, and Anding, as these western territories were poorly defended and offered plenty of supplies that the Shu Han army would need to continue their attack at more difficult targets such as Chang'an. Therefore, Zhuge Liang would end up picking the Mount Qi path, which was also the best path for large armies, as the Han River would run through the entirety of the pass, which would enable the reserve forces at Hanzhong to continue to provide supplies to the main army on the front. With this path selected and the attack targets confirmed, Zhuge Liang still had to add a layer of deception to his strategy, as even with a poor and neglected defense out west, taking such a vast stretch of land would be difficult, as the Wei court would not sit idly by once Zhuge Liang's army showed themselves out west. So in order to draw the attention of Cao Zhen, who was in charge of most of the armies in this area, Zhuge Liang also decided to give Zhao Yun and Deng Zhi just 10,000 troops to move into the Baoxie path, which was the third closest path to Chang'an, and also the path that Cao Cao had used in his prior Hanzhong campaign, in order to bait Cao Zhen into the Baoxie path and away from the main action out west. And this plan worked to perfection, as the moment Zhao Yun and Deng Zhi's armies moved into the Baoxie path to take a position at Qigu, Cao Zhen responded by personally leading the main Wei forces into the other end of the Baoxie path, as no one from Wei suspected an attack out west from the Mount Qi path. And with these attack plans set, We're also going to be ending our episode here, as we're going to come back next time to discuss the initial success of the first Northern Expedition and the Wei response. So hopefully you have all enjoyed this episode enough to drop a like to help support the channel, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!